Right.
So people have a term, racism, and it can just mean basically anything.
Yeah.
So, if I say that I love my little blonde hair, blue eyed babies, and I want my grandchildren to have blonde hair and blue eyes,
Yeah.
I'm a racist.
Yeah.
And so
you are. But
yeah.
if somebody said, I love my black child with his black eyes,
yes, and his black curly hair
Yeah.
and his brown eyes
Yeah.
and he's dark and he's beautiful, and it's like, well, he's not a racist for that. Hey friends, my name is Tanner Cartwright, and this is Jerry Dorris. We're here for Snake on the Table. We are currently at the Farm Kitchen, Shelbyville, Kentucky.
Yeah.
One of the places we've identified as the gates of the city. People gather here a lot to just hang out, chat, eat.
We're actually early.
Food.
They're not even officially open yet.
Not yet. Yeah.
But there's people.
There's people everywhere. Yeah.
It's going to be pretty.
People just show up. Yeah.
In a bit.
Yep. Brother, what's our snake this morning?
Your posts.
My post.
Yeah, no, I frame the question this way. Why can't we express natural affection for being white? And I think that's a fair question.
Yeah.
You had put a post out there that basically said you want your grandchildren to look like you. And
actually, what I specifically said is that the statement, I want my grandchildren to look like me, is normal from anybody.
Yeah.
And so I'm not just saying that I want specific, I'm not saying, the post wasn't, I want my grandkids to be white. The post was anyone, it's natural for anyone to want their children to be of the same race, background, heritage, culture as them.
Yeah.
That's my point.
We would not, wouldn't even react if a Filipino or a Japanese or Chinese or somebody says, I want my grandchildren to look like me. We wouldn't react that way.
Of course we wouldn't, and I've heard that so many times. How many times have we heard things like that?
Yeah.
I recall even in the Hall of Fire, there's a good brother at church who is, he was born from an interracial marriage.
Yeah.
And he's in an interracial marriage.
Yeah.
And his child, he was joking and kind of like, dang it, his child ended up a little more white.
It's whiter.
He's white. He's like, boy, he got the white genes, and he was kind of joking, but he was halfway serious.
Yeah.
And we all laughed, and none of us thought anything about it.
Yeah.
But if the roles were reversed, and I was in his situation as a white man, and I said that, like, man,
they can say it, you can't say it.
He can say it, it's fine. If I said that, I'm a racist.
Yeah.
And so there is a underlying problem with the way that we're thinking about this issue.
I agree.
And so even Christians, so many of them, they are failing to think through this in a proper way.
Well, there's been a couple books that I think we have read, and we've been talking about this topic for years.
Long time.
Because we talked about Kinism years ago and determined that, we identified what Kinism is. I want to go through that. I think that'd be helpful. That was one of the questions. I had put this out on our Facebook page for Snake on the Table and asked, and that was one of the questions that came up. And I think just cataloging those things. But I think we've been influenced recently by the book, The Age of Entitlement. Yeah. That's been super helpful.
Yep. Because
our culture has shifted on this topic. And we have all grown up in it, and I think there's a whiplash effect. There's a reaction now by white men that are like, "Hey, I'm tired of being the guy that's always the one that's put down, the one that has to be,
I can't have things. Pride in my culture."
Yeah, so we've got a good friend, Peyton Bowman. He asked that question about why is this an issue? Why do we even have to have this? I don't care what the color of my kids are. That kind of stuff. I would argue you do, and it would make a difference, especially now that you're married. If you had a black child, all of a sudden you'd be like, "Whoa, something's wrong."
Well, that'd be a problem, wouldn't it?
That would be a problem. But even his natural affections, he gravitated towards a white woman. I did, you did.
Yeah.
There is a generality that we're gonna gravitate towards people that look like us and sound like us and have the same cultural influence. Yeah. And so outside of those bounds it's an anomaly that happens.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and we tend to think that culture and race we act like there's no connection.
Yeah.
And there is.
Yeah.
There just is a connection.
Absolutely. I wanted to walk through this. I see 4 categories that we need to know about. The first one is kind of the water and the air, air we breathe and the water we swim in right now. And that is what I'd call colorblind Christianity.
Okay.
We have been, since the 60s, we've been hit with this. And then especially the church has been hit with this. And so we have a view that makes us intuitively repulsive. It's kind of like, it's equivalent to feminism. We have our inner feminist.
Oh, yeah.
And then there are things that we say or do about women, and people bristle at that. The same thing about our cultural moment here in terms of how we view one another.
Yep.
We're influenced by cultural things that we don't necessarily recognize. And so I would recommend highly that people read The Age of Entitlement
100%.
As a book.
Well, and a lot of that, what you're saying is it's connected. It's all the idea of egalitarianism. We want everything bland and flat and the same.
Well, we're doing this with women and men.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so we
my point.
we have biblical masculinity and femininity, and what is the goal of society? What is it now? Androgyny.
Yes.
That men look like women and women look like men.
Exactly.
And so we're losing that. It's too early for that, man.
No.
All right, so I was going to read a couple of these. So this colorblind Christianity, it believes noticing or valuing ethnic or cultural distinctions is unspiritual. It always conflates categories from spiritual and physical into one thing, and so you can't say that. It equates unity with sameness, treats creational differences as problems. It adopts a multiculturalism for everyone else while rejecting loyalty to one's own heritage.
Yes.
So they can look and say, I love multiculturalism, I love all the diversity, but when it comes to my version of diversity, I cannot defend it, I cannot like it, I cannot have gratitude for my heritage or any of that kind of stuff, because the moment I express gratitude, I am oppressing other people's their views.
Yes.
That's our current moment right now.
Yeah. Well, even in the appreciation of multiculturalism and all, and who doesn't appreciate multiple cultures? Like, I've never met anyone who didn't.
Right.
But what you're saying is that, yeah, I love this specific culture, I love this specific culture, but your viewpoint and your mindset would end cultures being distinct.
Yeah.
It would end. It's like there is a Ethiopian people that are distinct from other Africans.
Yeah.
There's distinct people within Ethiopia itself. There's distinctiveness. And your idea that, not your, I'm saying whoever, this idea that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Well, that would end the distinctiveness of Ethiopia.
We get a picture.
I don't want that.
Here's the thing: we get a picture of the end, and at the end, Revelation 7.
There's still
9,
distinct categories of people and nations.
Yeah, Revelation 7, 9, and 10. They're all around the throne, and what is it? It's one homogenous group of people worshiping. No, it is nations and peoples and languages and tribes that are around. Well, those are separate statements, and it doesn't mean that just because there's that diversity around the throne that one hates the other or any of that kind of thing. In fact, in Christ, we love other cultures and other nations and stuff because we recognize that Christ died for them as well as my white race. My German.
Yeah,
I'm a mix. I'm a mutt. I'm German and Cherokee Indian. So
heck of a mix.
I know.
That's a violent mix.
All right, a couple more here. So it embraces the colorblind morality as the highest ideal. I don't see color. I don't care what color. You got quote tweeted by James White. I've never thought about this because he is superior in his colorblind morality.
He's more holy than me.
Yes, that's what's going on. And then it reacts from social pressure rather than biblical conviction. These aren't derived beliefs from what the scriptures teach.
Yeah.
It's from what culture presses in upon them. And then, of course, it treats expressions of natural affection as moral compromise, which you can attest to by the outrage of people. And then, that's good. So that's the air we breathe. That's the water we swim in currently.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've got to be colorblind. And even Vodi Bakum has gone after that it's dumb. Yeah. We all recognize there's differences.
Yeah.
The one of the things that kept coming up on Twitter and I didn't see everything. It was just overwhelming, obviously. But one of the things that kept coming up was the idea that I just care about skin color.
Yeah.
And the foolishness of that, to think that race or heritage is just about skin color, is ridiculous on its face, pun intended.
Yeah.
Because if you painted me black, I still wouldn't look like an African.
Or act or sound or think.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So there are differences that are more than your melanin count. This idea that race has to do with melanin count is bonkers to me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah. So it's an issue.
It shows what you value.
Yeah.
Because that culture tells us what we value.
Yes.
So there is a black culture. And
Yeah.
there is a white culture. And there is, we can even break it down farther. I mean, even to your family. We'll talk about race here in a minute, but like race in terms of the heritage of the Cartwrights or the Dorris.
How are we defining that?
You guys value things that maybe other families don't, but you look at other families and when you see shared values and how you parent, how you view the world, your work ethic,
Sure.
entrepreneurship, that kind of stuff, that is a gravitational pull to a different family, especially when we start to marry people and stuff like that. You're going to be more attracted to that than giving your daughter over to a culture that doesn't care about those things, isn't entrepreneurial, has only been workers their whole life,
So let's put the snake on the table. So Delane Shannon or Chocolate Knox from Cross Politics, good brother, love him, met him many times, just a joy to be around. But he has said this statement for years and years, and nobody ever has a problem with it. He says, and it's on his Twitter bio, "Give me the black church or I die."
Right.
And it's basically
He can say that.
Well, it's a play off of John Knox, "Give me Scotland or I die."
Right.
And so, but if I say, "Give me white, blue-collar America or I die," I'm a racist.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to recognize there's an inconsistency there. And so if Chocolate Knox says, "I want my children to be black, I want my grandchildren to be black, and I want to see God save the black church," everybody's like, "Yeah," and applauding him.
Yeah.
And I would too. I'm in that group of applauding him.
Yeah.
But let's turn it around. Can I say that?
Not in our current culture.
Not in our current
Not
culture.
with that reaction. You have said it.
No, I can say it.
You can say it. Should
I'm
you
gonna
say
say it.
Everybody's like, should you have said that? You're white supremacist. You think your culture is better than other people. They immediately assign all of the cultural baggage that has been put on them to say that.
Yes.
And then they label you a racist or a kinist. Because that's the label we put upon people to keep them subjugated to this ideal of colorblindness. And if you step outside of that in any way, you're a racist, you're a Nazi, you're that kind of nonsense.
Yeah. Foolishness.
All right, so let's define kinism.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
I think this would be really helpful for people. And again, this is something that we've talked about and came to a conclusion on
years ago.
I think at least 3 years ago for sure.
Maybe longer.
So kinism, we would say, is a sinful distortion. And it claims that interracial marriage is sinful.
Yep.
It demands ethnic separation in the churches and in family and society. And again, that if you cross those, that's a sin issue, because they're trying to derive that the Bible is commanding us to be not mixing together, and if you did that, that's sin.
Yep.
So,
and it's hard because there's so many branches of kinism. Most or many kinists that you run into they're not coming from a biblical perspective.
Right.
So a lot of kinism comes from an evolutionary perspective.
Sure, but even kinism, they have that word is coming from the Bible.
Sure, I'm saying that a lot of them wouldn't. They would say it's wrong. They wouldn't necessarily say it's sin from a biblical standpoint. I'm just saying it's not just one idea within kinism, and a lot of them you'll run into. They're not making biblical arguments.
Yeah.
They're making solely cultural or it's biological determinism is basically their base.
Yeah, and this is where we would put Corey Mahler.
Sure, I would say he's actually said that not all interracial marriages are sin. He
has
believe
said that? Okay.
Yeah. He said that even in the debate with Save.
Okay, I didn't hear that. I didn't watch that debate. I watched the white debate.
Yeah. So I don't know if he would embrace the term kinism or whatnot.
Okay.
But regardless,
I don't
it
mean to
doesn't
put
matter.
that on him.
But
I don't care. I don't care what he thinks
don't
about
think
anything.
I think he's an idiot.
So it exalts ancestry and bloodline in near spiritual significance.
Sure.
I think it commits the sin of partiality, which is James 2:9. Because if you're not allowing people into your church, or if you're only going to serve your race in your church, that's the sin of partiality there. I would argue that it rebuilds the dividing walls that Christ has torn down in Ephesians 2. I would say it substitutes the gospel unity with racial loyalty, which is problematic. And then finally, I think it distorts natural affection into ethnic idolatry. That would be my argument. Now, I do think that what I would put forward in the next category, which is the biblical natural affections, I think there's some shared views with Kinis on some of these kind of things.
Sure.
But to label this next view as kinist is just false.
Well, it is, because you're importing all of the wrong ideas of kinism.
Right.
And bluntly, even kinism, if you're a kinist, it doesn't. There are Christian people who would call themselves kinists that we would strongly disagree with.
Yeah.
That are not. It's not heresy unless you're saying that two races can't take communion together.
Yeah.
If you're saying that churches have to be separate, that's a heresy.
Yeah.
Because the only thing that divides Christians is the only thing that divides the people in the church is the gospel.
Yeah.
And so if you're making it a gospel issue at that point, then I'm with Paul that you've got problems.
So would you say, and I don't think I'd say this, but would you say that a kinist, that they see their race as better? I mean, I think objectively there are like pagan cultures and race, not the skin color here, but the culture that's around there. I think there's a morally superior races in terms of those that have been Christianized and they have laws and stuff, as opposed to a cannibalistic tribe in Papua New Guinea.
Sure.
Right? There's an objective thing like that.
Sure.
But I don't think even Kinis would say we don't evangelize, we don't go and share the gospel with other nations, right?
I don't know that. I've never actually met a kinist.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Kinism to me is kind of it's a
boogeyman term.
It's a boogeyman term. So years ago when we were researching this, I went and listened to a bunch of guys that were self-proclaimed kinists.
Yeah.
And what I found is they all have a different view of what it is. It's hard to nail down.
It's not a monolithic movement.
It's hard to nail down a definition because of that.
Yeah.
So it's, anyway. So while I don't like the term, I'm not gonna take the term on myself.
All right, so let's jump. I'm gonna go to my fourth category, and then we'll do ours last.
Okay.
But that would be racism. So a lot of people would say kinism is racism.
Sure.
And I don't see that necessarily, but racism it's going to treat ethnicity as inherently superior and more worthy than another.
Yeah, I don't think racism is a biblical category of sin.
Yeah,
I think it's bigotry.
Well, that's what I would say. So yeah racism actually isn't a word we say this a lot, but we're wanting to go back.
Yes.
We want to go back in time. So we always look at like the 1828 dictionary.
Yes.
The word racism doesn't exist in the
in
1828. The first time it's used is like in 1903, and then in the 1930s and 40s when we start to see Nazism, and that's when racism starts to build in popularity.
Yes.
Where it's a moral superiority and we're better and other races need to be exterminated, that kind of idea.
Sure.
That's where it's coming from. But it is the showing of partiality and injustice based on ethnicity.
Sure.
So that would be the James 2:9.
Yes. Showing sinful partiality.
Yes, exactly.
Is that what we need to talk about? Is like
when we say racism, we're talking about sinful partiality.
Yeah, I think that's the difficulty with a term like racism. It becomes so broad for
right
people.
now, it's super broad.
It's super broad.
We don't-
Everyone's a racist.
I wouldn't use it in that same way. I mean, I'd use the word racist, but I'm thinking of it in a biblical category. And so I know I'm not racist.
Yeah.
You know, I love we have we have a diversity at our church, you know, and we got creamy little babies, and we got Hispanic families that are beautiful children, and I'm not looking at that going, well, I'm better than these guys.
So if you
they don't not welcome at my church.
Yeah, if you define racism as, okay, here's a Hispanic family in our church, and I'm superior to them because I'm of the white race,
that's a problem.
that's wicked.
That's wicked, yeah.
So if you say, here's a Hispanic family in our church, and I think it's beautiful, and I want them to maintain their Hispanic heritage, and who they are, and who their ancestors were, and have pride in that, and have, you know, respect that, and honor their ancestors, and honor their lineage, and honor who God made them.
Right.
And I want to do that in my own group. I want both of us to maintain that distinctiveness
in the same church,
because I think the distinctiveness is beautiful.
Yeah.
Then if that's what you're calling racist,
I can't help you. If that's what you think racism is,
I can't help you.
I can help you. All right, real quick. It despises and mistreats image bearers due to their people and appearance. It uses ethnicity to justify pride, hatred, exclusion, and violence.
Sure.
Stands in direct contradiction to the gospel's call to unity in Christ, and then often cloaked in cultural language, but rooted in the sin of pride and malice. That's biblical racism, if there is such a thing. We would say partiality.
Yeah.
Yeah, ethnic partiality.
Yeah. So one of our issues in today, and no matter what topic you bring up, is defining your terms.
Right.
So people have a term, racism, and it can just mean basically anything.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I say that I love my little blonde hair, blue eyed babies, you know, and I want my grandchildren to have blonde hair and blue eyes, I'm a racist.
Yeah.
And so
you are. But if somebody said, I love my black child with his black eyes,
yes,
you know?
and his black curly hair and his brown eyes, and he's dark and he's beautiful, and it's like, well, he's not a racist for that. I don't think so.
All right, so here is what we would argue is the biblical category, and that is biblical natural affection.
Yep.
That we have a natural affection for our own.
Yep.
We have a natural affection for my wife and my kids. I have a natural affection for my parents and my brothers and my sisters and my bloodline. And then we look alike, we think alike, we talk alike.
Yep.
There's that, and I would argue that that's what our culture is trying to rip us away from and tear the fabric of. Yep. So that we don't have those natural affections anymore. Yes. And that's what's happening in our individualized culture that we live in. We don't have a sense of this is my people and this is my place. Yes. You know, like I'm white, I'm Germanic, I'm from I don't know what's your ethnic background?
Mainly English. Yeah. So I'm mainly Anglo. Yeah. But I've got some Italian. Yeah. But I'm mainly English and Scotch-Irish. Yeah. With some Italian mix.
So, and I know we're trying. Both of us are trying to reestablish that sense of location. But I have that shared visual and shared cultural thing. But I also have a location. Yeah. We're from this area. Sure. We're in Shelbyville, Kentucky. We own property here. We have businesses here. We know the community here. This is us. Yep. But that's being torn apart by individualism and all those kind of things.
Yeah, so why did I earlier say white, blue-collar America? It's because I identify as my people with, going back to 1378, the Cartwrights were Anglo working class people. Yeah. Okay? That's as far as I can get back to the Cartwrights. It's 1378. So for 600 and whatever years, the Cartwrights have been white, Anglo working class. That's my culture. Yeah. That's who I am. That's where I identify with. And so I think there is a stability in that. Yeah. And so this idea that we have to get rid of all distinctions other than Christ. So it's like, because we're Christian, that means that that we can't have any distinctive identity outside of that, which is ridiculous on its face. Can you be a Cartwright and of the Cartwright tribe, and still is that faithful Christianity? Well, of course it is. And so this idea that we can have no identity outside of being Christian, well, that would have a problem with Chocolate Knox saying, "Give me the black church or I die,"
Absolutely.
and identifying that way, and having a people and a group. And so this is bluntly. So if you spend time, and I guess I don't know, these people that are going after me online, even the Christians, good brothers. Yes, like we saw a guy even last night that
Called you a clown.
Called me a clown. This is a brother in Christ, and I just don't know. He's just been so influenced by our cultural, like he's swimming in.
Yeah.
But I don't wonder if he's ever been to third world countries or other countries at all, because other places don't struggle with this.
No.
You go to Ethiopia, they are proud. I'm talking about the Christians.
Yeah.
They are proud of being Ethiopian.
Exactly.
You will hear every person in Ethiopia will tell you how they invented coffee or they found coffee.
Yeah.
And they're proud of that.
Yeah.
And they're proud of Ethiopia. And they'll tell you how they fought the Italians and how they did and all this stuff, that they're proud of their heritage. And we all go, yeah, that's good for them.
Yeah.
It's not good for us.
Yeah.
And I find that problematic and inconsistent.
And that's why it needs to be confronted.
Yeah.
It's a taboo in our culture. And well, going back to the why is this even an issue? Well, we have been, white men specifically have been taught to hate their heritage.
Yep.
And it's a new word to me, but we've been deracinated. We have been,
Yes.
we don't have a sense of home. We don't have a sense of culture. We don't have a sense of heritage.
Roots.
Roots. And that needs to be reestablished.
Yes.
And that's good and it's healthy and it's Christian for us to be okay with who we are.
Yep.
And I'm okay with who you are.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not racist for me to do that.
Yep.
All right, let's go through this real quick. So biblical natural affection, it gives thanks for one's ancestry, culture, and people.
Yep.
We base that out of Deuteronomy and Acts. It desires generational continuity and covenantal legacy. Like you think about you as a grandfather, you want your grandchildren to carry forward your work ethic, your businesses even. They're running the businesses that you established for them. They're living on the land that you blood, sweat, and tear and God for them.
Yep.
So there's that continuity and there's a covenantal faithfulness back to my heritage. You want, so that your grandchildren and then their children and their children have a sense of, I belong here. I'm a Cartwright. I love it when I hear, well, I'm the fifth, I'm James the Fifth.
Yeah.
You know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because that shows that continuity.
Yeah.
Which our culture doesn't have. It's so foreign to people even now.
It's stabilizing. It's stabilizing for people.
Yes.
It's stabilizing for me. Like, so the first Cartwright in America that I could find was was Matthew Cartwright. His son was Thomas.
Yeah.
Matthew Cartwright. I named my last son Matthew Squire Cartwright.
Right.
For two reasons. Because one, Matthew is pointing back to the Cartwright heritage in America, and Squire because of Squire Boone in this area, Shelbyville, Kentucky.
Yeah.
I'm intentionally, even through his name, rooting him.
And he will be told that.
Yes, and he'll be taught that and who he is. And that is going to give him stability.
A sense
for
of identity.
where I came from, who I am, what my, who I am.
Watch this. So right now, I mean, we've seen this uptick of identity.
Sure.
Who am I? And people are trying to figure out for themselves who they are. And so they pull from cultural things around them or whatever, and then they adopt something, and like they're moldable and they're shapeable. When you answer that question from birth, you are a Cartwright, you are Matthew, you are, and you go back and you give that child a sense of identity. It gives them self-confidence, strength, tells them everything they need to know as they enter into the world. They're not entering into the world and going, okay, I'm going to pierce my nose and do my hair purple so that I know, so that I can stand out. And then you end up looking like everybody else is doing the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. We've bought into the cultural idea that we're all individuals, not groups, not people. Like I'm not anything other than an individual. Yeah, you are. You are.
You are.
And that's a biblical idea. But God deals with people in groups. You see that throughout Scripture. Yeah. And so this idea that we're all individuals is where now we're getting the transgenderism, where we're getting all this stuff. I can be whoever I want to be. It doesn't matter where I come from. It doesn't matter who my children are. None of these things matter. It's just me as an individual. So I don't care about my ancestors. I don't care about who my grandchildren. I don't even care if I have grandchildren.
Yeah.
And so there's no Yeah, there's just nothing bigger than ourselves.
Yeah, it's hyper individual. Of course,
Yeah.
we are individual people. We stand before Christ
Yeah.
alone when in judgment. Those kind of things. We do have a sense of individuality, but we also should have a sense of connectedness.
Yep.
This is where honor and my name, my family name, and bringing reproach to my parents or bringing reproach to by the actions that I do. I'm reading the Strong Gods book. What's that book called?
The Return of the Strong
Return
Gods.
of the Strong
That's
Gods.
a great book.
I forget what chapter I'm in, but he's talking about how corporations, it's not just it's cheaper overseas to build things and do stuff. It's just that the American work culture is so weak. There's no sense of pride in what people do,
Yeah.
and so when a business comes in, they want to do start something. The work ethic that comes, they don't want Americans because Americans are not hard workers.
Sure.
They want it in China. They want it because
Mexico,
those people
yeah.
in Mexico, those people have a sense of family and heritage.
Yeah,
You think
pride.
about all the Mexicans that have flooded even our area. Well, what are they doing? Making money and sending it home.
Yeah.
That's all they do because they have a sense of family and
Yep.
connection.
Yeah.
All right, real quick. So the biblical natural affection, they rejects racial superiority and ethnic guilt. So we reject that. Yeah, I do recognize that. I think there are cultures that are better than other cultures because of their proximity to Christ and the way that they honor these things. I would say that. This is the flip side, the ethnic guilt. I reject ethnic guilt.
Yeah.
I am not going to feel guilty for being white any longer.
Nope.
This is the whole thrust of the white boy summer movement.
Yeah.
I am done being guilty for being who I am,
Yeah.
and you will not subjugate me anymore. I'm
Yeah.
going to wear
I'm going to embrace it.
I'm going to wear my pit vipers and my shorts and my
Whatever
flip
it
flops,
is, yeah.
whatever I am, and I'm going to do what I do, and I don't care what you think.
Yep.
That's-
God made me white.
Yes.
He made me this way.
Yeah.
And bluntly, if you were from an interracial marriage, God made you that way too.
100%.
There's nothing wrong with that, and you can celebrate both cultures.
Yeah.
I tend to think that people that come from the multiple backgrounds, there can be a inherent struggle there of who I am.
Oh yeah.
It's not sinful.
We've
but
seen this
how
with
many,
adopted kids.
Yes. How many adopted kids? I was talking to a brother just Sunday. We spent all Sunday just chatting, and he was adopted. I didn't know that, but and he has struggled. We talked about that. And he was a white boy adopted into a white family, and yet he struggles with his identity. He struggled with, who am I? Am I a, from his adopted name and his family's into, is that who I am?
Yeah.
Or am I? And so there is an inherent struggle. And that just points to the brokenness of our world. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And he has to struggle through that. I don't have to struggle with that in the same way.
No.
There's a stability. And I asked him that. I said, do you think there's a stability to me not having that, knowing who my ancestors were, knowing who I am, and having that confidence? He said, oh, of course.
Yeah.
Of course there is.
I made a mistake with growing up. And I was young. I didn't know that I was making a mistake. Now I look back and I should not have done that. But I adopted the Dorris last name because that's my stepdad's last name.
Yeah.
And in doing that, I mean, I still have that connection to my other family, the Seidner family. But I disconnected myself from who I was. And because I had done that, I saw in both of my boys a desire to, I can just change my name. They had no sense of, I'm a Seidner.
Yeah.
I've never given them that.
Yeah.
They have some semblance that they're a Dorris, but that's because I chose that name, and apparently we can just choose our names. Just
Yeah.
like I can change my hair color or wear a different shirt, I can just have a different name. And so now looking at my sons and trying to instill in them and talk to them about that is it's important.
Yeah. What does it matter if someone takes his wife's name instead of keeping his family name?
Yeah.
What does it matter?
Yeah.
We can
That's
all-
our culture we live in.
Exactly.
That's the culture we live in. All right, here's another one. The biblical natural affection view sees interracial marriage as lawful while recognizing cultural wisdom and long-term implications.
Yeah.
We both of us would say it's not out of the question, and it's certainly permissible. We've seen it in the scriptures, but is it wise?
Yeah.
Is it wise?
Yeah.
That's the bigger question.
So, and I think this is a distinction between me and someone that would maybe identify as kinist or in that camp, is that I tend to think it could be wise. I tend to think it's fine, it's permissible,
Yeah.
it's certainly, and it might be. So, if one of my children, is like, I'm interested in this person who's of a different race, but they were raised in Christian culture. I would even say white Christian culture, because that's what America's founded on.
Yeah.
So the West, as it were, if he's raised in that, I'm going to have far less problem with that than if it's from a different culture. So for me, the cultural argument ties into all this.
Yeah.
And so I want my children to marry people with similar backgrounds and culture and heritage, even if they're of a different race. But I still think that there is wisdom in considering, is this wise? Is this best?
Yeah. It's not just about skin color.
Yeah.
What it's about is the culture that's represented often by that visual distinction. We can see that. Sometimes we can see it on the clothes we wear. We can see it in the demeanor and how we carry ourselves.
Sure.
So I used this example last night with the guy who called you a clown. That would he be okay marrying his daughter to a Christian Saudi Arabian? Because somebody in Saudi Arabia, they have a view of women. They have a view of, you can just list a bunch of things that they hold to. Are you really okay with your daughter going to that just because he's Christian? Is that the only thing we look at, is that people are Christian?
Yeah.
I don't think that's wise.
Yeah.
I don't think that's wise.
Well,
and that should give you pause.
It should. And one of the things I articulated, because I had a lot of people asking that question, similar, like, well, if your children are interested in someone from a different race, well, are you going to tell them no? Are you going to discourage that? Well, my answer is that for my boys, possibly. For my girls, probably.
And why?
Why? Because for my boys to marry someone from a different culture, background, or race, they're bringing their spouse into our culture, race, and identity.
Yeah.
They're bringing them in. If my daughter marries someone like that, they have to assimilate to that thing.
Yeah.
And I think that...
And it's your duty to protect your daughter.
Yes.
From that.
Yeah, because there's inherent difficulties that come with that.
Yeah.
I remember specifically, there's a brother that back in Tennessee, and he's in an interracial marriage. He was from India, and we were talking, and he was talking about me and Laura, and he just done an offhanded statement, just talking about our similar backgrounds and identities. He's like, that takes out a lot of the heavy lifting.
It does.
That was his phrase, and I always remember that. Because me and Laura we have such similar backgrounds and ideologies and just identity. Even if you go back to 1378, my wife's family were Kennedys in Scotland.
Yeah.
My family was just northeast of Yorkshire.
Yeah.
In England.
Yeah.
Well, it's a couple hundred miles.
Yeah.
And today you could drive there in no time. So there is a shared, this is who we are.
All the way back.
Yeah. So.
But even more recently, you guys both came out of the same church. So
Yep.
you had the same theology, you had the same outlook. You actually were able to witness her walk with Christ and she yours. And so that was important.
Our families were very similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was just there was already easy cohesion. Yeah.
I would say, there's other American culture has been steeped in feminism. So as we look at the women that our sons or even the men of Ref Church are looking at, I am on guard for feminism.
Sure.
In that person. It's not just skin color. It's not just culture.
Yeah.
There's some ideologies that how much are they infected by that, because that's going to really affect their submission to your headship and your leadership and stuff.
I think people, when they read things like what I said, they think that if I had the choice between a nominal
Anglo 8 and
a nominal weak, white boy for my daughter, or a strong Christian black boy for my daughter, if those are my two choices, I'm going with the white boy.
Yeah.
It's like as if that overrides everything.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I have a preference for what my grandchildren look like. I have a preference for the culture that my grandchildren grow up in, and I don't think it's wrong.
it's not wrong to do it.
It doesn't override everything else.
Not wrong to say that. and you'll express that preference to your daughters, and if they were to bring somebody home, you would probably go, I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
And knowing your daughters, they would go, okay, Dad.
Yeah.
They'd listen to you.
Well, bluntly, I think it bothers people because my daughters and sons, my children have a responsibility to honor me.
Yeah.
And if I think like this, they have a responsibility to honor me.
Yeah.
And they do.
So the
does that mean that like I am, well, go ahead.
Well, it gets into the culture of dating as well, in that I think a lot of people that may be even reacting, they think, you go and you found something, you've fallen in love, and now you're connected to your bond, and your dad's saying, nope, Romeo and Juliet, you got to cut it off. That's not going to happen either.
That's
because
ridiculous.
You're going to be involved in actually pointing your daughters to young men to say, have you considered this guy? Have you considered this guy? And going through, and obviously it's her choice who she's going to marry, but you're intimately involved in that whole process.
Yeah.
Before her heart is so bound to something that you're trying to rip people apart.
Yeah, bluntly, there are white families I don't want my daughters marrying into.
Yes.
Most of them.
It's not just about.
It's not just this. It's like,
or even being a Christian.
So the idea is, there was one guy on Twitter, and he's a goober, but he had asked me. He said the reason that this is a problem is because you are excluding large truths because of small ones. No, but just because that there's an overarching, there are spiritual realities that doesn't override all the physical realities.
Yeah.
We're not Gnostic.
Right.
We are who we are, and it matters, even the small things.
Yeah.
So,
Amen.
Anyway.
All right, a couple more. Understands love for one's people as natural, not ultimate. Submits all loyalty, familial, ethnic, and nationality to the Lordship of Christ.
Yep.
And then finally, rejoices in distinction without division and legacy without idolatry. That's just why, like, even at our church, we love the diversity that we have in our church. And we're not that diverse. We have Hispanics, and we have Black people. We have diversity.
Asians.
But we are predominantly a white church because Shelbyville, Kentucky is largely a white community.
Yeah.
There's a small Black subset.
Well, but even those in our church that are of a different race, they've embraced white Christian culture.
Yeah, well, most of them have been adopted.
Yeah.
So
or they were biracial themselves.
Yeah, they were biracial. Yeah, exactly. So they have a cultural identity with us.
Yes.
The songs we sing, the way we react to things, it's all similar.
Yeah.
And so they share that culture with us, and they're not feeling like, oh, I'm a Black person in a white church. They don't even think about that.
Yeah.
Or I'm a Hispanic person in a white church. No, we don't think about that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let me move to a different document here.
Okay.
And just make sure we're covering all the questions.
Yeah. What other questions did people have?
Let's talk about race. The word race.
Yeah.
I think we're okay with the word race.
I am.
And that's largely because of the way the 1828 dictionary defined race.
Yep.
Not Darwinian race.
No.
In the way that has put it.
This is an idea in Christianity before the Darwinian idea.
Yeah. So race, like in the King James Version and stuff like that, is talking about. So there's the race of Adam.
Sure.
That's
it's a proper use of the word.
Right. So that's a grouping of people. So we're all a part of the race of Adam.
Yep.
But then you would have races based upon national identity.
Yep.
And you'd have race based upon family identity. So my descendants. So the race of Cartwrights, the race of Dorrises, the race of. It's how it's been used.
Yeah. So and then you also have the big. So you've got those are the two ends of the spectrum, but in the middle you've got the biblical idea that there are mainly three groups of people on the earth, and they come from Noah's sons.
Yeah.
So you got Hamites, you've got the Japheths, and you've got the Shemites, which basically Shemites were Asians. That'd be that whole area. Then you got the sons of Japheth ended up in Europe, and the sons of Ham ended up in Africa. This is well known.
Yeah.
And so you have mainly three groups of people over the world. And obviously there's mixture and there's ethnic. I think of race as a big category for people.
Yeah.
And ethnicities is categories within a race.
Yeah.
So whereas I am, I'm European, I'm white European. I am distinctly within that English, Irish, Italian, the subsets within that. That's who I am.
Yeah.
And so we tend to conflate race and ethnicity, and most people do not define their terms. But I think of race as those three big groups, and then ethnicities within that. And the Webster's Dictionary lays that out, that race can be used, the race of man, or race in a big category of people.
Yeah, it's a word that has multiple uses depending on the context. And we would make sure that people recognize that God is the one who determines these things. He's the one who sets the boundaries of nations. He's the one that sets these different groupings and the tribes and the peoples and the nations that will surround him. He's in control of all of that.
So people take that verse from Revelation where you've got around the throne every tribe, tongue, and nation among men.
Yeah.
And you see that distinctiveness, and they try to say, oh, someone with our view hates that. No, it's the opposite. We look at that and I say, see, there's still distinct people around the throne of God. And so do we want everyone to just become homogenous in the same shade of brown?
Yeah.
That's not what we see around the throne. We see people with distinct identities around the throne.
Into eternity.
It's beautiful.
God wants this into eternity.
Yes.
And he's the determiner of those things. And it's okay to be proud of who you are.
It is actually a rainbow, not just a shade of gray.
Yeah.
Not a uniform shade of gray.
Yeah.
And so one of the reasons that's so beautiful is that the gospel overcomes those. It's the overarching identity for those in Christ. Even though I'm, dear brothers in Ethiopia, one of them I lived with for a while when I was over there. And it's like, he's going to be Ethiopian in eternity.
Yeah.
And I am white European in eternity.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. And the gospel brings us both to the table. We both partake of the same cup and worship the same Lord in the same baptism and have the same faith. That doesn't get rid of our distinctiveness.
No.
It's beautiful, actually, when we have distinctiveness and
all worship
and are in unity in that.
Yeah, 100%.
Anyway.
All right. Some of these questions we just put in here to make sure we cover, like how is your position different from kinism? We've answered that. Let me ask you, if a man wants his grandchildren to carry on his ethnic and cultural legacy, is that a matter of personal preference, conscious holiness, or obedience?
Yeah, it doesn't make you more holy.
It doesn't.
Yeah, so I would say it's an issue of preference. I think it's an issue of wisdom.
Yeah.
It is not in the category of sin for me.
Yeah.
And I think maybe going back to earlier point, that may be a distinctiveness between me and a kinist.
Yeah.
And so it is not a issue of sin. I think it's an issue of, it could be wiser to not do that, or I think it could be more stabilizing for your children.
Yeah.
It's in those categories.
Yeah.
There's even, this is one of the things that gets brought up, but even for especially Europeans and Africans to mix, there are health issues. There's health things that need to be considered. And it's not massive. It's not something that needs to be overdone, but the idea that, and here's why. The reason it's not become some curse of Ham foolishness. Okay, that's foolishness. I reject that doctrine whole cloth. But Europeans and Africans were distinct for so many thousands of years, very distinct, that now if my daughters marry an African man, neither of them will be able to give organs to their children.
Yeah.
Or
they can't be blood donors to their.
Well, even when I've been getting texts because I'm due for going and giving blood.
Yeah.
It matters what your race is when you give blood, because
they want to know that.
Difficult. The most difficult group of people to find organs for, blood for, or bone marrow, any of those things, is Africans and Europeans in our context.
Yeah.
Because they were distinct for so long that there are biological differences.
Yeah.
So bluntly, if my daughter marries a black man from Africa, an actual black African, then there's a good chance that my grandchildren could have sickle cell anemia.
Right.
And so, it should that even be a consideration? I think it should be.
Well,
is it overarching? Is that the biggest consideration? Of course not.
No.
But it is a consideration.
Well, just as fertility would be a big issue, if you knew that a man who was marrying your daughter was infertile,
Yeah.
you would say, I don't think this is wise.
Yep.
To your daughter.
Well,
So
it's
you would consider biological issues.
Well, and it's fairly well established that biracial marriages there is a less of you have less fertility.
Really?
Yes.
I haven't studied that.
Yeah. So for an African and a European, there is more. They're able to have children, no problem. But
This question came up, and I wanted to ask: Does even talking about this, does this hurt your gospel witness? That was the question.
Does it hurt my gospel witness? I don't think so.
I don't think so. But I do think in our current culture, where people are in this colorblind Christianity mode, and they immediately react to that they're going to see it that way. That, oh yeah, you're making a big deal out about this. First off, the gospel, it affects everything. It's something that we communicate. It's something that people enter into, and then we submit to Christ. It's something that's part of everything that we did. But it doesn't define everything we talk about or everything that's necessary for us to know about.
Yeah.
This is why people like Joel Webbin and others that are talking about all these other issues, they're growing in such popularity because people are like, we can talk about this now?
Yeah.
We can talk about my whiteness
Yeah.
and not be afraid to talk about it. Yeah, I think it's actually wise to have a breadth.
There's a lot of things that people say hurt our gospel witness.
Yeah.
Our public proclamation, because we're aggressive culturally and politically,
Yeah.
because we are biblically patriotic, not patriotic. Patriarchal, thank you. I can't talk. The fact that we're patriarchal, does that hurt our gospel witness? Well, if it's true, it's true.
Yeah.
And so we shouldn't shy away from things that are true because it might hurt our gospel witness.
All right, this is your private opinion. Keep it private. Shouldn't you
No.
keep it private? Why not?
No. Well, look, if you don't like my opinions, don't follow me on Twitter or Facebook.
Sure.
It's like, well, why are you saying this? And it's like, well, why are you commenting?
Why are you watching
Get off
this?
my
Why are you reading it?
Exactly. Get off my Facebook.
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't care if you follow me. I don't care if you care what I think. If you don't, fine.
It's not the gospel.
Don't, yeah.
What are you doing? When it's not the gospel, you should only talk about the gospel. I just find this mentality so frustrating. Well, first off, I think it's refreshing, especially we talk to the men of Ref Church. It's refreshing that we're talking about this.
Sure.
And I want to do this podcast for the people of Ref Church.
Yes.
As they watch this and they see, you come under attack for saying something. Well, we should be talking about this.
Yeah.
We want to cultivate a sense of heritage, an honor and respect and righteous diversity, not what our culture says just because they say it. Just because the currents of our culture are swirling around and pushing us for individualism and all this stuff. I want to fight that.
Yeah.
I want to fight that.
Well, and bluntly, I feel like God has put me in a position, both personality-wise and in every way, where so I can say these things and get 6.5 million views and attacked by thousands of people, and it doesn't affect my family.
Yeah.
I'm not in danger of losing my job. I'm not, it doesn't harm my family. It doesn't harm me. So I'm in a unique situation where I can say basically anything I want to and let the pot stir. And I'm in that position. So I'm embracing it.
And praise God.
I'm embracing it. Yeah, 100%.
Just give me a warning.
I didn't give you a warning on this one.
We've gotten 5 one-star reviews on our church because you are a racist.
Yeah.
And that's just from pure ignorance.
Yep.
We got an anon email, somebody saying you're bringing reproach to the name of Christ. You're staining the name of Christ, which I gave a public response to on Twitter about that. Anyways, yeah, you get me in trouble more than...
I'm sorry. I add to your workload.
I'm totally okay with it. No, we live in a society now that is undermining the bonds of connection and family and just our continuity.
So the way that Doug Wilson has articulated it is they want us all to be individual BBs.
Yes.
Like in a beanbag chair,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And what do you have with that? Well, you open a beanbag chair, what stability is there?
Nothing.
None. It's just everywhere. It's a mess.
Yeah.
Instead of, it's like we have these identities that are cohesive and they're strengthening. So I want the Cartwrights to continue that. So basically, what I said, going back to what I said, is that my ancestors are white. I'm white. I want my grandchildren to be white.
And what's wrong with that? And I'm saying I don't want you to be white if you're black. I'm not telling you that I'm better.
I'm standing here saying that I don't want the black identity to go away. I don't want the white identity to go away. I want people to maintain who they are and rejoice in that. And I believe it gives them stability.
Yeah.
So I just,
So if your daughter and your son and your daughter or whatever, they get married and they adopt a little black baby, are you going to hate that baby?
Oh, anathema. It's the food.
Careful, they're going to cut you out.
It's the most foolish thing ever. I'm not responding to people that even ask that because it's insulting, bluntly.
Yeah.
And so,
We were talking to a brother last night. He's a grandfather. He's got a son-in-law who is from more of a black culture. He himself was mixed, but it's still black. And then his daughter's white, and they married each other, and they've got this creamy baby. And he loves that baby.
Yeah.
He's been sending me pictures, him holding it because he's been out of for military service and was gone for a year, and he just loves his daughter, loves his son-in-law, loves and you would love your son-in-law or you would love your daughter if that happened.
Sure. Well, and bluntly, that's a family that I'd be fine with my daughters marrying into.
Yep.
So it's like I got no problem with that. I think people are thinking like that it's like, well, if you've got someone who is 1/4 African, you don't want your daughters to marry them. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So
Well,
anyway, get off my Facebook. Quit putting words in my mouth.
Yeah, exactly. Brother, I think we've answered all these questions that were here just by going through those categories. I think hopefully it's helpful for people. We set up some walls that they can say, okay, I fit in this box. I'm in here. I'm here.
Sure.
I think the people responding to you are ignorant.
Oh, yeah.
They're ignorant of what's happening in our culture around us. I would highly recommend they read The Age of Entitlement. Would be super helpful to them.
Read anything, for crying out loud. Just read a book.
Read a stinking book.
Well, and bluntly, so there's a book, Who is My Neighbor? And it's a great book. I highly recommend it. John Harris recommended it not long ago, but it goes through basically who is my neighbor. It goes through the view throughout history of who is my neighbor, who am I, the identity of people. And if you go and read older Christian writers, they all are on my side on this. All of them.
Yeah.
You're not going to find the reformers that are just like, yeah, it doesn't matter if you just mix races and whatever, and that's all. That's a moral good. That's superior.
It's a modern invention.
It's a modern
civil
invention.
Rights movement
None of them thought like that.
But prior to the 1960s, this is the prevalent view: natural affection.
Every one of the people attacking me, their great grandparents were on my side.
Yes.
And they have lost something within the last 100 years.
They're so deracinated from their own culture that they are picking on you for what their grandparents believed.
If I had said what I said 100 years ago, everyone from every culture, from every racial back would say, yeah, of course, duh. Yeah. Why are you even saying that?
Yeah.
But that's how effective the social conditioning has been on the church and on all of us. And here's the thing, so many people think it and can't say it. And I recognize that, but it just, anyway.
Yeah. All right, buddy, you ready for breakfast?
Yeah, let's eat some breakfast.
Let's order breakfast. Thanks for tuning in.
God bless.